In a recent article, reporter Teddy Schleifer recounted details from his interview with former FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried in his home in Palo Alto, California. Schleifer also said the first thing that he noticed was SBF's German Shepherd greeting him at the door, and then the second thing was, of course, the ankle monitor on his foot.
Sam Bankman-Fried has had plenty of time to himself behind closed doors since the FTX implosion. But what is going through his head right now? And who would he tell when everyone is out to get him and serve him up on a shiny silver platter? It looks like we got some insight. Let's get into it.
All right, this interview is quite the scoop. You talk about hitching a ride to see SBF at his house where he's living a kind of cloistered existence with just his family. You read about how it was quiet when you got there. His parents seemed to be upstairs, didn't come down during the interview, and kind of painted a very interesting portrait of what his day-to-day life is like right now. Can you tell us a little bit about how you were able to get access for this interview?
Sure. I mean, it's a totally fair question because obviously, understatement of the century that people who are under house arrest, charged with perpetrating one of the greatest financial crimes in American history, don't typically welcome anybody, reporters, observers, lawyers, into their lair, right? I mean, obviously, there's enormous legal risk that he already faces, and when you start welcoming people who can ask questions about your mental state or your decisions, that can only expand your legal risk. But I mean, the reason why I think Sam wanted me there, and I think why Sam is, an unusual defendant, to put it mildly, is he, like lots of, people in the spotlight, feels that he is misunderstood. And as a reporter, you often witness people in these emotional, raw, highest profile moments of their life. And to some extent, as a journalist, and you're looking for the overlap in the Venn diagram. You're looking for the moment where what you want, which is, to capture somebody and deliver a great story, overlaps with what the subject wants. And what the subject wants here is to be better understood. So that's kind of, it was the better alignment that it doesn't happen every day, right? I mean, ultimately, what's keeping that Venn diagram from overlapping often are the lawyers, the handlers, the parents, the people who say, shut up.
Or one's own self-interest, to be honest. And so, I mean, it kind of begs the question, did you sense these moments? Did you sense moments, despite him wanting to be, let's say, better understood, where you felt like he was perhaps undermining his own interest? Did you ask questions? I mean, did he seem contrite? Did he seem to understand his own legal liability? Do you think it was grounded in an understanding of what his vulnerability was legally? Or do you think there's a kind of hubris operating here where some people have opined that he seems to think that he can outwit the public, outwit the legal case against him, et cetera?
Well, just, a day or two after our story published at Puck, Sam wrote a Substack post.
We read and talked about that and had great interest in that.
But it's sort of the same thing, right? I mean, ultimately, that obviously, opens up, I can tell you, SCNY prosecutors are reading that post closely. And, typically, in crisis comms, right? I mean, you guys know this as well as anybody, right? You have kind of a narrow surgical response to arguments, and you litigate it in the court that, is best handled to adjudicate it, whether that's like a real court or the court of public opinion. Sam here seems to think that, the legal risk that he may be incurring by speaking to me or speaking to, his followers on Substack is basically worth it, right? He thinks that ultimately he's not going to sit there and take, 9 months or a year or however long of punches. He wants to fight. And maybe you win, marginal sympathy in the PR battle, day to day, but obviously, that incurs, legal risk. So it's kind of a question of whether or not it's worth winning, the public relations war on Tuesday, if it means, extending years more in jail. Only he can answer that. Look, he talks about, for instance, lots of companies that have struggled over the last couple of months or the last year, right? He talks about the broader crypto downturn. I mean, there is an element of, Sam was going to show up in Congress and say that he effed up, right, for, national television. So he was prepared to take some responsibility. But but ultimately, he calls it this failure to hedge that he sort of blames on Alameda, which, as you guys have talked about, is this affiliated hedge fund, which Sam says he didn't really control. So, like, to some extent, I think there's contrition. And I do believe, he knows the consequences, right? He understands there are people who, lost money as a result of him effing up. But he sort of paints it in this broader context of, like, lots of companies were effing up around this time, essentially. But Sam also is aware of the fact that, like, one of my takeaways from the interview is that he is contrite, but he's almost performatively contrite, that he knows he's supposed to be contrite. And I don't necessarily think that's that different than any politician who's kind of going through a scandal, right? Where do they think that the media is out to get them or their opponents are out to get them? Absolutely. Do they think that they screwed up, when they, plagiarized a speech or something like that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they know they screwed up.
Or fabricated an entire origin story and all of their achievements.
Whatever. Sure. I mean, honestly, this could apply to any scandal in any industry where people in the crosshairs feel that they both made a mistake, but it's still motivated by their enemies. But they just know they shouldn't talk about the second thing, right? So they are contrite, but they also almost exaggerate their true contrition, if that makes sense, because they know that they need to, like, play nice for the cameras.
Well, and he seems to also think that, or at least in that Substack, it comes across at the end that it was all salvageable. He could have made right by everyone, but then the bankruptcy people come in and they just say, well, to hell with even trying. Like, we could have given it another go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That sounds like it's the opposite of contrition. When you write about it feeling put upon, like formulaic kind of contrition, a performance of contrition, that to me feels a lot more accurate. And we saw a little bit behind the veil, right, in that Vox interview that wasn't supposed to be a Vox interview, where he was DMing with someone who we thought was not on the record with, and he said some, I think, more honest things about how the effective altruism was. Some of the effective altruism was kind of also performative. It was a scam. It wasn't. It's the thing you got to do for PR, exactly. And this is the main critique that has come down about SBF and the coverage of SBF.